Today, we interviewed the one and only Jenna Kutcher, who you probably already know. But if not, she's a marketing expert, a multi-7-figure entrepreneur, a mom. And today, we're specifically talking all about podcasting. Jenna hosts a top podcast, one of my personal favorites, The Gold Digger.
And Jenna's ready to launch a live masterclass. We wanted you to be the first to know. All the links are actually for this free training down below. So if you want to get access to that or just learn more about Jenna and what she's up to, we want to make sure you had all the links.
One of the reasons Stephen and I are passionate about podcasting is because the longer we're in the entrepreneurial space, the more we realize that every single one of us, including you, have a powerful message. And I believe it's time to release your voice.
So if you're hearing the word podcast and you have some reservations, I would encourage you to give this episode a shot. There is no higher leverage, lower barrier entry method to really grow your brand, grow your influence, and grow your income than podcasting. This conversation is about to change your life. I know this because I heard this guest speak and it changed my life. I don't know if she knows this, but we were in the room. We were in an industry event. It was called Rising Tide Society. It was San Francisco. It was this small room. And I was the videographer shooting this event as Jenna spoke in front of this audience. And Jenna had this powerful message on vulnerability, but there's one thing she said that stuck to me and it completely changed my life and it completely changed Chelsey's life. Mm-hmm. She said, this was my first $1 million year. And I don't know about you, but when you first hear something like that from like a peer, someone who was in the same industry, it was like mind blowing. It was my 4-minute mile moment where I was like, that's possible. And doing it in a way that's loving and serving and like, that is totally ethical. It just broke my paradigm and it planted a seed that was like, there's something more. And Chelsey had been encouraging me, honestly, for years to release my voice, to start stepping into coaching. Little did she know she'd be pulled into it as well and really be the star of the show. And so with that, we want to talk today about the topic of podcasting. And we have the one and only Jenna Kutcher. Welcome to the show.
Okay, I did not know that story. And I remember that room and I remember what I was wearing. And I also remember the first time someone broke that 4-minute mile for me. So I am grateful to have been able to do that for you. That's huge.
Jenna, we're so excited to have you. But Jenna, we've been podcasting for about 2.5 years now. And as you can imagine, like podcasting with your spouse takes some work. And sometimes like we drive each other crazy or we're like, oh, we gotta like elbowing each other next to one another. But when we first got this setup that we have now with our microphones and the audio and everything, Stephen would always do something that would drive me crazy. We would hit record or we would go live in one of our Facebook groups and he would forget to unmute me. And one day he wrote like, unmute Chelsey on this big, bright Post-it note. And he stuck it like it's staring at me right now. I can literally see it. And I will like never forget the moment that he stuck it on, like our podcasting setup and it left this like mark on me and it really stuck with my, like it was calling me up, as I see this Post-it note. Unmute Chelsey. And tears like welled up on my eyes like the first time that I saw this sticker because honestly, like for so many years, like I wanted to hide. I didn't think I had anything valuable to bring to the world. And I didn't think I had anything to contribute or say. And so today on the show, we're talking all about the very thing that helped me step into my calling, which was podcasting. And so, Jenna, I would love to know, like in the beginning of your podcasting journey, what was that moment for you where you knew you needed to release your message?
Oh my gosh, I love that story. And, it's so interesting because the other day I was telling someone about the very humble beginnings of the Gold Digger podcast. And I sat in my parked car, the same car that I'm still driving to this day, in our garage in winter with no heat. And I told myself I was doing it because we have 2 little rescue dogs that love to bark. But I had this realization the other day that I was doing it because I was afraid of even the person I love the most, my husband, hearing me try to speak with authority. And I had this realization of like, wow, like I felt so intimidated and afraid to be a beginner that I literally had to hide in my car with pillows on the dashboard and tell myself a lie to like hit record on that first one. And it's funny because when people go back to episode number 1, which they do every single day, I am reminded of like how far you can come when you literally just simply and humbly begin.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That word you use, authority, is something we use a lot. And we always like want to bring people on the show that carry authority. And Jenna, me and Chelsey always have this conversation before an episode, like, what does she carry? Because I feel like what you carry will be reflected in those you lead. And this is one of those things, like that thing of like stepping out when it's scary, and doing it in a way that is like we call this the go before you know, like going before you know.
Yes.
Like it is such a powerful thing you carry. And I've seen people who, when they get around you, like it amplifies in them, and us included, like watching you, just like go where you've gone. It's been truly incredible. So on this topic of podcasting, because I know there's some people listening right now that are like, podcasting, it's not for me. Like I think it's kind of like Amazon. We do Amazon. A lot of people just don't know about it. So like, oh, not for me. Right. But in your opinion, like, why, like you've gone on the journey of podcasting. Why is podcasting like such an incredible opportunity for business owners, entrepreneurs, and moms?
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. So one thing that I love about podcasting, and I'm a listener of many podcasts, is that there isn't that competition in the sense of like people only have one, right? Most podcast listeners listen to many shows and even many quote competing shows. And it's funny that we met at a Rising Tide event where it's community over competition, because I feel like the podcasting space is one of the only spaces left where there is room at many different tables and listeners listen to many different shows and have many different trusted authorities, which I think is super powerful. And I also think that podcasting has a very low barrier to entry, right? If I can start my show with literal iPhone headphones, the same ones I'm wearing today, and sit in my car and hit record on a show that now has over 100 million downloads, anyone can do it. Like you don't have to have an office space, a camera, this incredible setup. You literally just have to use your voice. And we were talking about this, but I think it's powerful to mention so many of the reasons why I started a podcast is like, I did not like to be seen, right? I was learning to feel comfortable being heard, kind of like you, Chelsey, but I did not want to be seen. And so starting a podcast was a way that I could literally have my mom bun, my sweatpants. I recorded hundreds of episodes in a spare closet with like the boxes that literally say like random junk that no one's going to open. That is where my podcast was born, and that was where it was made. And I think that what's beautiful about that is there's so many things that we want to do. And a lot of people, especially women, want things to look a certain way. And instead, we get to focus with podcasting on how things make other people feel. And I think that when we think about it in that way, instead of what does it look like, but what does it make other people feel, that's really powerful. And the last thing I want to mention that I love about podcasting is that it puts the listener in charge, right? They get to choose where they tune in. They're inviting us as podcast hosts into their lives, whether it's washing the dishes. Last night I was drying my hair and I had a podcast in my earbuds. I listen when I'm on a run. I listen when I'm driving. And so we literally get to be this voice like in their lives, in their day to day, and they're actually in control. They're not waiting for an algorithm to tell them, hey, I think you're going to like this. They get to hit play and bring us into their world. And I think that having that power switch is super powerful when it comes to podcasting.
I know when we first got started in podcasting, like you just mentioned, like it's this opportunity for people to get connected to you in a really unique way. And I feel like hear how you process and hear how you share things out loud. Like we wanted people to feel like they're sitting across the couch from us having like a conversation. And Jenna, I know for you, you kind of said that you were like lonely. This was kind of like an experiment, but how did you like even know, like, what did you envision your podcast was going to be about? Just like sharing like, I'm lonely. Are you lonely too? Or was there like kind of a game plan as far as like, this is the content I'm going to try to hit in the beginning?
Oh my gosh. So it's so funny. And you guys are going to relate better than anyone in the world. So it was November and my wedding season had officially ended as a Midwest wedding photographer. And I was in my shower listening to Amy Porterfield, who is now my best friend in this online marketing world. And I was listening to her podcast and she was talking about something she was going to sell. She wasn't even selling it. She didn't even have a price point. And in my mind, I was in my shower and I would have reached for my wallet and handed her my credit card had there been an offer and an opportunity to do so. And I had this like really big aha moment of like, I have listened to her week after week. She has served me so much value for free. And if she's giving me this for free, I will pay for anything she has. And it was really interesting because I reached out of the shower, dried my arm off, sent a voice memo, which, by the way, if someone listening is a voice memo person like me, there's a really good sign you should start a podcast. And I sent a voice memo to the one team member I had at the time, which was a part-time virtual assistant. And I said, hey, I think I'm going to start a podcast in this off season. I think I'm going to launch it in the next month. It's going to be awesome. And she was like, wait, what? Like, we never talked about this. This wasn't in our plan. We were supposed to be entering our rest season. And the thought behind it was, I just wanted to experiment. I said, okay, if I can commit to doing 10 episodes and I see how it feels and I see if I like it and I see if it works, I think it's a great experiment. And I think one thing that so many entrepreneurs get wrong these days is they're not willing to experiment. Try something new, show up in a new way, be a beginner again. And so at the very beginning, I was so lucky because of the Rising Tide Society to be connected to a lot of different creatives. And I was having these conversations offline of like, hey, what type of marketing is working for you? Or have you heard of this email list building thing? Does it matter? And I was like, how do we bring these conversations online? How do I get to ask people the questions I've been dying to ask them? And what does that look like? And what's so interesting, Chelsey, to circle back to your story at the beginning of this episode, at the very beginning of my show, it was interview only. And I think that there was a part of me that questioned, like, do I have value to bring besides the guests that I can get? And so at the very beginning, the first handful of episodes were straight up interviews. And let me tell you, I was not a great interviewer. I was interjecting. I had thoughts. I had ideas. I had notions, which was the inclination of maybe you should do some solo shows, Jenna. And it was interesting because at first I just thought, wow, this is a cool way to get connected and highlight other people. But it soon became that and an opportunity for me to share my life, my story, what I'm learning, what's working, what I failed at, all those different things. And so it definitely evolved. But it really did start as this like, let's just do like a mini experiment that turned into something so much bigger than I could have thought.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit because we call this the bubble over benefits in Rainmakers, because like a lot of people want to do one thing and then that thing leads to something that they could have never, ever expected. For you, like, what has that been for podcasting? Like, you maybe had a destination in mind at the beginning, but where it's gone is so much different. So like, what have been some of those bubble over benefits that have come from stepping into that territory of podcasting?
Yeah. I mean, I had an amazing book deal. So I have a book that hit the New York Times bestseller list. How Are You Really? I don't think that would have been possible without my podcast. Literally on the cover of my book, it says host of the #1 rated Gold Digger podcast. I think that was the space that my voice was in. I have been able to interview incredible people like Matthew McConaughey and Tony Robbins and Barbara Corcoran and like all of these incredible humans that I would have never in my right mind had access to if I hadn't started my podcast. And I also feel like I've been able to take people on the journey. So something that's interesting about me, and even thinking about when we first initially met, like you and I have both pivoted so many different times into different spaces, into different areas, into different offers. And I don't think that my pivots would have been powerful or even well received without explaining what they were and why I was doing them and bringing people on the journey. So like my podcast literally got to like tell the unfolding of whatever was next. And this next one, I think, might set another 4-minute mile, but we are on track to do over $1 million just with my podcast alone this year.
That's
amazing.
amazing.
And so that's something that I think not a lot of people understand or know is like, there are so many different ways that you can monetize a podcast so that it's not only adding to your impact and your authority, but it's also adding to the bottom line of your business in a really powerful way.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's like you are a gold digger in me and you dug that goal out now. So now
I got you.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I think of like the legacy piece of podcasts. I mean, I think, written word is one of those things that lives on for a long, long, long time. But spoken word is really that new format. What do you think about like, even, as a mom, as, you have 2 beautiful daughters, what do you think they're going to do with your podcast? You know, like when they're older, do you ever think of them when you're recording your episodes?
Yes. Well, my oldest daughter will sit at my desk and say, until next time, gold diggers, keep on digging your biggest goals. I'm like, okay, clearly you're listening. You know, what's really interesting, and I think a lot of people don't understand, is that when you look at podcasts, you have to choose a category, right? And there's a lot of different categories. There's arts, there's business, there's comedy, there's true crime. There's so many different categories out there. But what's beautiful is that it's a way to tell the full story in a different way. And it doesn't have to necessarily fit into that bucket to be a part of your brand. And one thing that's super interesting is that when we were going through the process of starting our family, we hit a lot of loss and roadblocks and sadness and grief. And we went through this period of this waiting season where I experienced 2 losses back to back. And I was a wedding photographer at the time. And so there's a lot of complexity around the timing of it all. And I recorded episodes about that piece of my life. And to this day, I will probably get at least 1 email a day of somebody who has gone back to those episodes that were so raw and vulnerable that I cannot listen to them again. But I just got one the other day. It was from somebody I know. And she said, you don't realize it when you recorded it, but like you created a space where I could just sit with you and you sit with me through this. And this is, 5 years later that this episode is still making an impact. And so what I think is beautiful is that, you and I, we're all bloggers, right? We still blog. We still believe in the power of blogging, which I think is powerful. But there's something about hearing the story out of somebody's mouth and feeling the emotion. And it encompasses the depth of what it is that they're talking about in a way that I don't think is possible in written word, that I don't think is possible in 15-second dancing reels. I just don't think you can get that. And so I do think about my kids listening to it. And, we shared things like our birth stories on the podcast and just different things like that, where I'm like, man, I'm so grateful that I had a reason to record that, because I probably wouldn't have sat down and made that a priority if I didn't have something bigger at play. And so I think it's just been beautiful because people have not only seen the evolution of my business, but they've watched me evolve as my life has evolved. And I think that it's really powerful to be able to do that. And a podcast is the perfect platform to do it on.
I totally agree. I love the more in-depth storytelling, and people can hear the inflection in your voice, the emotion. I know, like, we've cried on many podcasts, just like telling stories. And I've listened to like your birth story, and it like inspired me when we started a podcast. I think I thought in the back of my head, like, wow, I'm going to get to share like my birth story with the world. And that was exciting to me because up until that point, I think we had just blogged like Kaizen's birth story, but with Oliver, we had the podcast then. And it is this like intimate, close thing. And I would love to know, Jenna, like for like the mom who's listening, who is like, I love this idea. I have a lot of things that are bubbling over in me. How would you encourage them to know like what to start recording, or like what category to go after even?
Yeah. So I would definitely think about like, what are the things that you find yourself ranting about or raving about or researching? I think those 3 things are like really powerful things, whether you have an unpopular opinion about something, or there's something that has absolutely changed your life or transformed it, or you find yourself like going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to solve a problem. And one thing that I think is so powerful about podcasting, and even just the online world in general, is that you don't have to have it all figured out. In fact, I think it's better if you don't. I think it's better if you are one step ahead of people and you're guiding them because you know exactly where they're at. And so I think for so many people, it's like we want to wait until the after reveal, right? And we're living in these versions of us that we feel like are the befores. But in reality, and I think so much of my success can be attributed to it. And Stephen, you kind of reference this, like I've always just been able to be like, hey, come with me. I'm going to try to figure this out. And you're invited along the way. And I think that that's so powerful. Not only is it more vulnerable and authentic, but it's also this invitation for other people to start scared or to have imperfect action or to like figure it out as they go. And so if you are listening and you're like, okay, I don't really know what that would look like, there's so many different ways that you can explore. So one thing that I've been leveraging a lot with my podcast is ChatGPT and AI. And just typing in like, hey, I'm super passionate about X, Y, and Z. What are 5 different things I could talk about on this topic? Or what are 5 things that people are Googling right now to learn? You could go onto Pinterest or go onto Google and type in a keyword of something you know you're interested in and see what people are searching for. In the terms of podcasting, if I go into Pinterest and say podcast, people are writing how to start, 10 episode ideas, how to write show notes, how to title your podcast. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's like 5 episodes right there that was just given to me based off of what people need and what I already know. And the other thing I would say is that because you guys have such an amazing community, ask people who know you to speak into your life. Like, I think there's something so powerful to be vulnerable and say, hey, like, I kind of want to start this thing. What would you love to learn from me? Or what comes easily to me that I think is common sense that would be life-changing to someone else? Or when you think of me, what are 3 words that come to mind? And I think that a lot of times we're just too close to our own genius, or we just, say, oh, someone can just Google it, or that's common sense. Everyone knows that. But in reality, those are those things that literally change other people's lives that can only come from you.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I was having a conversation with a friend even yesterday, and she's helping me process through something. And I've heard the same like stuff over and over again, but the way that she said it, like it literally pierced my heart. And I'm still thinking about it. I haven't gotten a chance to share it with Steven yet.
Yeah, wait.
But it was just like, wow, like I really got it and it makes sense and I have action. And sometimes I think that's like a misconception that so many women are held back by and men as well. But just like what I have doesn't offer. It's like, no, you actually have. And that's been my journey. It's like, I have a unique way of saying things that are going to resonate more with this audience or these people in leading this movement. And if I can begin to step into that and like own it and have confidence in that, like look at the other people that will have change. And so I have to remember that often when I am about to record something, because I've done solo episodes as well of like, I really don't want to do this, but I know that I'm supposed to. And I have to visualize that one mama on the other side who like needs me to give her a pep talk today. And I'm sure that like you do that as well, Jenna, when you're like doing it scared or uncomfortable, as you've like worked that and built that muscle up over time.
Jenna, one thing me and Chelsey are always impressed by you doing is like how you really do protect your family boundaries. Even like, I think I sent you the calendar invite for this and it was like, I got the default, like, here's my boundaries email. And it was like, this is so awesome. I need to set this up. But how have you been able to, produce a top charting podcast while protecting time with the ones you love?
Yeah, you guys, we are all so aligned on this. Like there is just so much to be said around doing work that pours into your family and also gives you the joy that you deserve to have without taking away. And so much of it is systems. Like people are shocked when they find out I have one person on my team that runs my podcast. One person. Like I know podcasters that have like 20 people on their team with shows that are way smaller than mine. And I think that we've just created systems around it that make it super fun to do without feeling daunting and without it taking over my life. And so essentially speaking, we have 2 episodes a week. So we have around 8 episodes a month. And I spend about 2 days a month on my podcast. That's pretty much it. And so we have just created a system of like, okay, what are we going to talk about? How do I need to lay these things out? I'm going to review everything at once. So what future guests do we want? What questions are we going to ask them? What is the topic? And do one full review day. And then usually I'll do 1 or 2 recording days. And that's pretty much it. And so it's actually funny because my podcast is probably the thing that I've become the most known for, but it's also the thing in my business that likely takes up the least amount of time, which makes it like so exciting to do, right? Because like you get to move the needle in a way that doesn't feel heavy. And with our family, it's interesting. We recently built our dream home and I like built my office so that it's connected to the garage, but not connected to the house so that I don't have to worry about kids running in, but that I'm right there. So I'm like literally minutes ago, I was watching Miss Rachel with my 2-year-old and hanging out with her before she went down for her nap. And so it's been this beautiful thing where it's like you could have, 10-minute episodes that you literally record on your commute on your voice memo app on your phone. You could have, sit down and record 4 shows in one sitting and have content for an entire month. It's something that is beautiful and you get to choose the format, the layout, the way that you deliver it, and you get to choose how much time you spend on it. And so I love this method for so many reasons, but I love that it is serving people at a really high level and at a really big scale without it feeling consuming. Cause I think a lot of people can do it the wrong way and it feels like too much.
Yeah, I agree. I love having systems. I love having boundaries. Me and Chelsey, we're thankful you're recording this on a Tuesday with us because this is our podcast day. And so thanks for helping us be kind to our family in that. Jenna, one question that me and Chelsey were just thinking would be a fun one was we love your where the woo meets work, like saying.
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring the woo into the work of podcasts, whether it's on interviews or like, do you have any techniques or strategies or things that kind of help you lean into that side of you?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So for anyone listening and you're like, wait, what? I feel like we are living in such a polarizing world in so many ways. I think we can all just like feel that. And I really believe, especially for women, especially for moms, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs, I believe that many women are meant to feel like there are two camps, right? It is like the hustle harder, wake up earlier, do more, never stop. And then there's like the slow living and like manifest it and it'll come. And I love both of those camps and I love the women in both of those camps. But I really believe that the magic happens when we find that middle ground where you do have these visualizations, these exercises, this vision for your life, but you're also willing to get up and do the work in a way that doesn't take over your life, but adds to it. And this was a huge theme in my book. I remember talking to my publisher at the very beginning and I was like, why me? Why this book? And she was like, you live in the middle. Like you live where the both and exists and not the either or. And I think that's really powerful. And when it comes to podcasting, I think it's a really beautiful strategy. And I think you guys already do this very well. But it's where you're mixing the stories, right? Like the message behind the mission with the tactical takeaways. And my biggest goal is with my podcast is I want someone to walk away and say, wow, that was totally worth my time. Because in my life, time is my currency, right? I think everyone's lives are that. A lot of people don't see it that way. And so I never want to waste somebody's time. And so we always start with the end in sight. So what is the tangible takeaway that someone is going to walk away from this episode knowing, learning, believing, trusting? And how do we get them there? And storytelling is so powerful, right? Like we can tell stories and I think our brains just automatically remember those details so much better than like the step-by-step tactics. So how do we mix those, the woo and the work, so that someone walks away remembering the story, but taking action and getting quick wins and results? Because if we leave people feeling like, wow, I can't believe they gave that away for free, they're absolutely going to be like me, dripping in the shower, wanting to reach for a credit card that didn't even exist outside of it to invest in whatever that next step is. And I think that's the power of podcasting, but it's also the power of kind of mixing that vision with the action.
Jenna, did you always have like with your podcasting? Cause I love this conversation of like woo makes the work and then also like having like boundaries. And you talked about having like your set 2 days a month where you are podcasting, you have these systems. Did you create that system from the beginning or did that happen like after something? Yeah. Tell us about like how you figured out like that rhythm.
Yeah. No, I definitely did not have it at the beginning. Let me tell you. I feel like everything is refined over time and, you know, it's been interesting. So when I started my show, it was just me and my part-time virtual assistant who was remote. And like all we had known was the wedding world, right? So like this was like a totally foreign thing. And then over time, I actually ended up hiring my sister and she started helping like manage like, okay, we want to do interviews. I need to get in touch with these people and kind of taking over some of those pieces of it. So it's absolutely been refined. But what I think is interesting is like when we think about systems, like they're supposed to like unlock freedom and creativity. And I think for so many people, they don't have that system. So they're operating from like scarcity or urgency. And our best work never comes from that. And so when I think about people who might want to become podcasters, a few things come to mind. So first, be willing to experiment. You do not need to set yourself up and be like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So this is episode 1 of forever. Say, I'm going to commit to doing 10 shows and I just want to see if it moves a needle. I can count it as season 1. And guess what? If I like it, then I'll just keep going. But if I don't like it, it's not a failure. And I think so many people are so black and white of like, this was a success or this was a failure. And it's like, No, it's just an experiment, and an experiment yields results, and results guides our decisions forward. And so I think that's step number one. Step number two is start really small. So maybe you're just releasing 10-minute episodes once a week, and that's what it looks like. You need 40 minutes of recorded content. Most of us could sit down, like Chelsey, I know you want to do Instagram lives once a week. Like someone could literally record that, and that could be the audio for their podcast. Like we can actually work this into the work that we're doing without it adding additional work. And number three to realize is that if you do your podcast intentionally, you can use so many different pieces of that for other places that you're likely already creating content. So like my podcast generates show notes, which go up onto my blog, which builds out my blog library and my search engine optimization. The content from my podcast goes onto my social media, which takes up social media posts. You know, the content from the prep for the podcast can become an email, or it could become a LinkedIn post. And so there are so many ways to do it in a smart way that I've had to learn over the years of like, how do we systemize this and also make it so that it is value adding, not just for the podcast, but for the entire brand and the messaging. And I think it can be really powerful and encouraging to see like, hey, this isn't just going to be more work. It's actually going to add to the work that I'm already doing or simplify that work in a beautiful way.
That's amazing. I love what you said. I never heard someone say this. System should unlock freedom and creativity. That's so powerful because I feel like a lot of the creative people, like a lot of the freedom people, they don't like no systems, because it just feels like constricting.
Yeah.
But we have seen that so true in our life. Freedom and creativity are unlocked. It's like there's freedom in the restriction sometimes. Oh,
yes. Well, I have ADHD. So like I often think about things like boundaries and systems of like, if you take your kids bowling and you put the bumpers up and you want the ball to stay going down the lane, those bumpers are kind of protecting it. For me, boundaries and systems are the bumpers that my brain requires to keep going towards the target. If I don't have those bumpers, you better believe I'm landing in the gutter every single time I roll that ball. And so I feel like it's a beautiful reminder of like, stay in alignment, stay with a goal, have these parameters that help you unlock your creativity. Because when you're working from scarcity or urgency, there is not an ounce of room or energy for creativity and passion. And I think that that's what most of us want to do. It's kind of like when we became wedding professionals and I'm like, I'm going to shoot photos every day and it's going to be beautiful. And then you realize like I'm shooting photos 2% of the time and doing everything else 98% of the time. And I think systems help give you that balance that you're wanting so that you have more of that passion in your life.
I'm sensing something. We pay attention to intuition, which I know you're a fan of. And I just feel like there's someone listening to the show right now who is like Jenna at the beginning. And I remember having a mentor in my life one time. I went to kind of like a taste and see type of event for something he was putting on. And he really challenged me. He kind of put his hand on my chest and he started speaking to me in a way that was just like not calling me out, but calling me out. And I just felt like it'd be so cool, Jenna, to hear you talk to your former self a little bit. Someone who's sitting, thinking they're still listening to this episode. There's something in their heart kind of bubbling up. Like, what would you say to her to call her up to this new opportunity that might be ahead of her?
Well, I would tell her to stop being embarrassed by her phone voice. We all have one. It's the same voice that we record our voicemail with 8 times before we hang up and say, is that what I really sound like? Yes, you really sound like that and nobody cares. And like your message is so much more important than the method. And I think that that's something that's so powerful in a world that is so visual and overwhelming. Like what would it look like to raise your voice up, to create this library that will live on far beyond you, to give people resources that they can find at the perfect time in their life and to document your journey every step of the way. You know, it's funny because a lot of times people will make fun of themselves at the early days and say, oh, that was so cringy. And I'm like, man, I love that girl that was willing to go for it. And I think that if you can shift that and pivot that thought of like, I'm going to be cringy to be like, I'm a beginner. And that fear I'm feeling is not because I'm a fraud, but because I'm beginning something new and I'm willing to try. It totally changes the energy you approach it with. And so I would just tell that girl, I'm so proud of you. And this experiment, this intuition has unfolded in a way that has not only made an impact, but it's also connected you to people just like you guys that you get to walk through life with And you get to share your message that you are learning along the way as you learn and grow and evolve as a human being, so that you get to invite people to learn, evolve, and grow right alongside with you. And I think that that is an invaluable gift that so many of us are waiting to give.
That's beautiful. You're changing even my language, because I oftentimes say when I start something new, like, oh, that's cringy, and I almost like poke fun at the fact that I'm showing up, in this imperfect, not super polished way. But you're saying, no, like, look at and be proud of that you are taking the first step. So even in hearing you speak that, like, you're speaking directly to my heart, Jenna, and just some of newer things that we're experimenting or that we're doing right here. So thank you for that. I would love to know, like, what are you really excited right now about, like, your own podcast moving forward? Like, even a month from now, 6 months from now, kind of like dreaming forward. What are you excited about in, like, your own podcasting space?
Yeah. So your listeners are probably going to be excited to hear at this point, because literally I ran my podcast for 6 years and never did video. And for so many people that you speak to, there is this fear of being seen. We've kind of touched on it. And for a lot of it, it was because I was literally recording in a spare closet. I will never forget the day that I went on to an interview and the guest had their video on. And I was like, oh, do I have to turn my video on? Like, I'm literally in my spare closet right now. And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And so I am finally in a space and in a place where I want to be seen, and I want this podcast to expand to other platforms. And so one thing we're working on now, after 6 years and hundreds of episodes, is expanding it into more video content. So like going onto YouTube, which is a world that is, again, brand new to me, but I'm not afraid of it. And so that's the biggest thing that we're focusing on. And it feels really exciting to me because I now have a space in my home, which is the first time in over a decade that I have a dedicated office. Most of my business was built on my couch. And I'm excited to kind of see what that looks like. But I also just think there is something so powerful about connecting with the face and connecting with that message on an even deeper level. So that's what we're working on behind the scenes with the podcast. But if you're someone listening and you're like, I don't want to be on camera, I don't want to show my face, I'm, shakily recording with my voice. It worked for me for many, many, many years, and it absolutely can work for you too.
So good. I feel like there is this person listening. You're still on this topic of podcasts. You haven't switched to podcast yet. There's something in this speaking to you. Jenna has something like epic coming up, and we'll be attending this. I want to talk about your podcasting masterclass, Jenna. So, this masterclass is going to be not only like how to start, how to record, and how to launch, but it's going to break it down in 3 easy steps. Mm-hmm. And I love how you do that, Jenna. I've seen you do this with Pinterest, with Instagram. You can take something super complex and go like, let me just like, it's like walking into the cockpit of an airplane and being like, you don't need all these buttons, just push these 3 buttons,
Yeah.
And so Jenna, tell them about the masterclass coming out.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I have not recorded this training. This is brand new, but I haven't recorded a training on podcasting in 3 years. So this is the time to attend. They're going to be live. It's called Podcasting 101, 3 Easy Steps to Launch Your Show. And I'm going to walk you through the decisions that you need to make today to walk away feeling confident that you're going to start a show tomorrow. And so there are so many things probably running through your mind of like, how do I record this? What do I call it? How do I sign in and out of my episode? What does my cover art look like? And we're going to help just make those decisions really easy for you, and also just simplify the thing. Because the thing is about podcasting is it's a lot easier than you're making it out to be. And so to be the queen of simplification on such a complex topic is really exciting to me. So I'm going to be doing 3 different live trainings. Hopefully one of the times aligns with you. You can sign up at jennakutcher.com/rainmaker. That's jennakutcher.com//rainmaker. And I'm really excited. And also when you show up, we have a free bonus where I literally have the exact links to the gear that I've used from the very first episode, which was just my headphones, all the way to the exact gear that I'm using today. And so I have beginner, intermediate, expert level gear linked up, and that's free when you just show up to the training. So I'm really excited to give that away because we've never given that away either.
Awesome.
That sounds amazing.
I'm excited to be there because it's funny because like we have so much learned to invest in ourselves when it comes to being like in the room with trainings and courses and things like that. But we never did that with podcasting. We're like, well, we'll just figure it out, you know?
Yes.
And so I'm excited to learn from you because you are
Yes.
many chapters ahead in the podcasting game. And this is a free masterclass. So you can count on us being there, Jenna. Super, super excited for our audience too. We really do sense there's something on this Unmute Chelsey post-it note that like happened just like earlier this year. And there's something for women specifically releasing their voice. And I really believe podcasting is like really an untapped like opportunity that is still very much on the rise. It's very much a low barrier entry, high leverage platform. And so, you know, if you've been a listener to the show of any like time frame and you've gotten value, like this could be for you too. Like I believe your breakthrough is not just for you, it's for other people. And this is when life truly starts to thrive. And so if you're feeling the draw, go to that link, jennakutcher.com/Rainmaker and get registered. Okay, Jenna, we have, in the spirit of Woo Meets Work, okay, we have a fun segment of the show we like to end with. We call it Dreaming Forward, okay? Dreaming Forward. We tap into a little bit of intuitive futurism for you and just your hopeful future. And so you've told us a little bit about what you're dreaming about, but would you be open to us kind of just talking about your future a little bit, what we sense, what we've seen in you?
Totally.
And maybe what would be fun is we could check back in a year or something and see how this is going.
Oh, I'm
Does that
here
sound
for
good?
this. Yes.
Okay, cool. So Jenna, I was thinking about you before this show and I really I just always get like, I'm a creative. I get little visuals. And so I kind of saw like you in the past season kind of had like a wall around your family, which is such a beautiful like boundary that you've had. And I see in this season, actually that wall is kind of like a brick wall. It's changing more to like a slatted fence. And it's really cool because this is like, so that your family, can really see the things and the opportunities. Like, I feel like the opportunities have been so much for you, but now it's going to really start to come to your husband and to your girls. And there's going to be like new opportunities kind of coming in through like still these really healthy boundaries, but in a way that really elevates them. And I kind of like, I was just visualizing this thing that like everything you've said no to because of those boundaries has actually kind of gone underneath you and raised you up in this season. And that is really your strength, is like learning to say no. But all those things that like, man, that was like the hardest no. I really feel like those are going to start to like circle around in this next season. And it's funny you mentioned the YouTube thing because I, kind of like the idea I had for you is like, this is going to be, and I know you just had Jada Smith on the show, but like, this is going to be like a Will Smith season for you. Like Will Smith went from, kind of like he went from a movie star to like a superstar. And I really felt that over you, Jenna, in this next season, that you're going to really have a global presence. Like I see you touching, Japan, Australia. I see you in South Africa. And just like having like a global brand. And maybe this is like, that's part of the YouTube thing, or maybe you're even dreaming about translating things into different languages, or maybe AI makes that very possible for us in the next season. But I just see that over you, Jenna, like you have a message that's called, like, that's really for the world. And yeah, I see even your daughters like speaking multiple languages. And I also like sense that there's a few more books. I specifically, I was kind of getting the sense for 2 more books in your kind of like repertoire that are coming out. I really felt like you have such a strength for like this health transformation you've gone through. And there's something that like needs to be written around that. And there's so many moms, especially that just would want that breakthrough. And there's something about identity. Like there's been like a shift in even your identity and like how you see yourself and how that's like amplify what you're doing. And I don't know. I feel like I'm excited to read books on those things from you. So that's what I'm sensing.
You guys are going to be my new agent. I love this. I'll have to send you a booking fee for everything. I love this.
Are you feeling anything,
Yeah,
Chelsey?
I just felt like, I just want to like honor you, Jenna. Like from me stepping out to sharing my message and just like all the vulnerability and all the things that I've specifically walked through in the 6 months, like you're so much further in that. And so, just as like another mama entrepreneur, like I just like honor you for like the seasons that you have just really worked through everything and like this beautiful like blossoming flower. Like I see you in a field with like a beautiful like pink dress on, and you are just like running through this like wildflower like field, just like just like totally free. And so I know that I feel like just from following you online, I can see that that is such a beautiful transformation. It's just going to continue, but it started with like the deep down, like figuring out the surface and figuring out the roots. And so Steve and I just want to like honor you for like how you have showed up, how you've impacted our lives over the years, like from a distance. And so, yeah, we're just excited for you. And thank you for speaking to our audience and like calling them up and saying like, hey, that messaging you have is not just for you, it's for other people as well. So yeah, we just honor you, Jenna.
Oh my gosh, do I get to like turn the mic on you now? Like, is that a thing? Because I was telling you before we connected that one of our mutual friends was just raving about you guys. And he's like, you guys need to be in the room together, which little did we know I had been in the room with you before. And I love the way that you guys lead, and I love the way that you break things down. And I love the way that you put your values first and out for the world. And I just think it's so awesome. And I also just am seeing a vision of all of us like together in a place like Mexico without children and having full conversation. So I'm just going to put that out there. So please circle back in a year on that last piece for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that one too. And I see poolside drinks, massage.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, Jenna, this has been such a pleasure. And again, jennakutcher.com/Rainmaker. If you're sensing this thing is for you, I would highly recommend you jump in. I believe there's going to be rainmakers in our community that look back on this masterclass as like, man, that is the thing that started it all. So Jenna, thank you for being here. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. Hey, if you are not a part of our Rainmaker Mastermind, we have a new opportunity for you to book a one-on-one strategy call with one of our Rainmaker coaches.
If you want to get a call with them, see if it's a good fit for you to work with us to build a business that allows you to have time freedom and financial freedom, you can get that call at makeitrainmama.com/podcast. That's makeitrainmama, MOMMA.com/podcast.